He's the sheriff that almost made it to Washington. And in this special edition of Quintin's Close-Ups, I talk exclusively with former Dorchester County Sheriff Ray Nash. Well, Sheriff Nash, I want you to take me back to early January when you actually announced that you would run for Tim Scott's vacant U.S. House seat. Tell me, what prompted you to run in that particular race?
I was over there in Afghanistan, sitting in my hooch, watching the news,
Yes.
and realizing that here I was trying to help them reform their government when it was our own government that really was in need of reform.
Yes.
And then a friend of mine, a mutual friend of mine, and Tim Scott's called me and said, I want you to pray about this. I want you to consider coming home early, running for Tim Scott's seat. And I gave him every reason in the world why that was a bad idea.
Wow.
And he said, well, I just want you to think about it and pray about it. Well,
Yes.
He called me at 5:30 in the morning in Afghanistan time.
Yes, yeah.
And woke me up. So after I got him about waking me up, I didn't tell him every reason why I couldn't do it.
Right.
But you know what? I couldn't get away from the idea. And so I called back home and talked to some trusted friends of mine and colleagues and prayer partners. And so I want y'all to pray about this for 24 hours. And then I want us to reconvene and discuss whether or not this is really something I should do. And to a man, they all said, come home, let's do this thing. And then my wife also was supportive. She said, I knew God had something really big in store for you. I didn't think it would be this, but come home and let's run for Congress.
And
so it got us home.
Yes, but you lost the primary now.
I know.
And you actually endorsed Mark Sanford.
Yes.
Out of all the candidates, why Mark Sanford?
Well, Mark has the conservative record. He absolutely does. He's got the background, he's got the experience, he's got the seniority going back into the House. And we all realize that he had some stumbles along the way, and nobody wants to discount that, and nobody supports that.
Okay.
But getting beyond all of that and looking at the potential for the future, and I had several one-on-one conversations with him, and I was convinced that his heart was right, and I was convinced it was his time, and that's why I put my support behind him, and still do.
Yeah, and I actually met him a couple of weeks ago at work on the market. He's a great guy.
Yeah, he is. He's a really personable individual, very genuine.
Yeah.
And I believe that his repentance is very genuine, and that he wants to get on with life and get on behind that, to learn the lessons, and wants to move forward in really helping return our nation to the founding principles, the principles that made us great to start with.
Yes.
To get back to that, those conservative values. And I see that in Mark. I see his heart, and I think he's going to make a great congressman once again.
And you touched on this earlier, but you actually served as the criminal justice advisor for the U.S. Embassy in Kabul.
Correct. Yeah, I was there. I was the U.S. government representative when it came to police professionalization, rule of law reform, and shaping our foreign policy and national security policy as it related to those issues in Kabul.
Yeah, and something else that's been keeping you busy a lot is police dynamics.
Yes, I've been keeping police dynamics alive. I did a whole series of videos, a lot of them from my hooch.
Right.
You call a little room, my little cubby hole that we live in there. And I did a lot of the police dynamics videos from there. And that's opened up some other doors of opportunity that I'm now engaged with the International Academy of Public Safety, which is an online training academy for law enforcement and public safety, providing leadership types of training online. And so I've just taken a position as a senior vice president with them. So I'll be working hand in hand with them to promote that particular program amongst the law enforcement community. And we're going to dovetail it with police dynamics.
That's great. Well, let's revisit January of 2009, when you actually announced that you retired as sheriff of Dorchester County. Take me back to that day. How difficult was that?
It was a tough decision because I knew the ramifications of doing that, but we had served 3 terms, and I felt like it was, I sort of term limited myself after the 3 terms. I had my time in to retire, and we had a good candidate that I fully endorsed. That was Terry Boatwright. Terry Boatwright had actually run against me the first time I ever ran. He was one of the 4 candidates in the Republican primary. I thought it was a crowded field of 4. 16 was outrageous.
I know, right?
But at any rate, we became very, very close friends in college during that time. And he told me, he met with me shortly before I made my decision and said, Ray, I want to run for sheriff again one day. I'll never, ever run against you again. But I just want you to know, if you ever decide to step down, that I would love to run again. And you know what? That was just a door of opportunity, Quintin, for me and my wife to say, you know what? This is the time. So I stepped down, rallied behind Terry. He didn't end up winning the election, but it gave me an opportunity to step down and support somebody that I really believe in.
Yeah, and after all of your years of being a sheriff of Dorchester County, that is, you've had a lot of high-profile cases. Tell me, which particular case sticks out in your mind?
Well, the Cricket Sorrell case was one big one. That was one that had haunted. It was the violent murder of a little 14-year-old girl named Cricket Sorrell, and it had haunted 3 different sheriffs. It remained an unsolved case. We put together a cold case team using some of our existing personnel as well as some retired New York City police homicide detectives that had retired into Dorchester County. We formed a cold case squad. We let them take a bite at it, and they didn't dig up a whole lot of new evidence, but they were able to piece it together in such a way that Walter Bailey, who was our solicitor at the time, decided to go ahead and prosecute it, and did a masterful job with the prosecution of a very, very difficult case. It was over 20 years old at the time, and got 2 convictions out of that case. And then there was another one that a lot of people don't know about this. When I was the police chief in Somerville back in the late 80s, 1987, 1988, we had a series of serial rapists that were going on there. Now this is the same time that Duncan Proctor was doing the serial rapes down here in Charleston, some of which were in Dorchester County. But we had 2 additional serial rapists that were operating at the same time in the downtown Somerville area. And those cases remained unsolved for 20 plus years. And get this, one day, one of my commanders and I were discussing this old case. I said, that's the one case that haunts me more than any other. And he said, you know what? We still have some DNA evidence from those cases from 20-something years ago, and now we have a DNA database. We didn't have that back. He said, let's resubmit these samples, see if we get a hit. You know what? We got a hit on 2 suspects that were already incarcerated, so they were already in custody on unrelated charges. We were able to charge them. Do you know that we got the hit back, the confirmation back from the DNA analysis on the very day I announced my retirement? Really? So that, to me, that was a full circle.
Yeah, I was gonna say. And you know, too, you touched on this earlier as well, but you were police chief of Somerville for some time.
That's right, about 7.5 years.
Talk to me about who Ray Nash was as a police chief.
Oh, I was just young guy who was trying to feel his way through everything. It was actually the second place I had been chief. I had been chief in Irmo sometime prior to that, very small agency. But you know, I was cutting my teeth. I give the Mayor Myers at the time, and the town council a great deal of credit for having confidence in a young guy. I was 26 years old at the time. And, you know, and I guess they saw something in me that allowed them to make that decision and bring me on board. And I was very grateful for that. And it was an opportunity to learn a lot as a young police chief in a relatively small agency. And we had the opportunity to really build a professional reputation in Somerville.
Yes. And also during the mid-80s, 1980s that is, I actually heard that you did some logistics in Jacksonville?
Well, I was actually in Jacksonville for about 2.5 years on the staff of the University of North Florida. There's a police training institute there called the Institute of Police Technology and Management. And it's an international police training facility. And I was on their training staff for about 2.5 years doing police training in a variety of different specialized topics.
Yes. And also, let's go back to Irmo. You were the youngest police chief at the age of 23.
The age of 23. Nobody knew for sure if I was absolutely the youngest, but I certainly had to be one of the youngest in the country. And I was one of the youngest of a full-time agency. We had 5 officers, so we had enough to cover round-the-clock coverage. And so we were famous in Irmo for the Volkswagen Rabbit.
That's right. I ran about that too. I mean, how did you guys adjust to that?
You know, it was during the time. It was kind of during the time of the gas crisis and the fuel crunch and all that. And we had a very progressive chief. He said, you know what, we could employ these Volkswagen Rabbits, we can save on fuel costs. And you know what, in a kind of a funny way, it put Irmo on the map. But don't underestimate those Rabbits. Those Rabbits were fuel injected, and they were high performance. We had a local race car, a guy that built race cars locally, actually fine-tuned those things.
Really?
And from about 0 to 90, they were quick. That's why they call them Rabbits. They were quick. I ran down my share of Camaros and Trans Ams, the old muscle cars, with that little Rabbit. And the only car that ever outran me was a Jaguar. And he got on the straightaway, and I just couldn't keep up with him.
I was going to say. And you know, a lot also too, let's talk about your high school years, which were actually very interesting for you. I read too that you were actually the police dispatcher for the Forest Acres, South Carolina Police Department?
That's correct. Forest Acres was a small agency in my hometown. That's where I grew up.
Yes.
And I got a job with them as a dispatcher when I was 17 years old. I was still in high school.
And you were actually working the radio too?
I was. I worked, I went to school in the daytime. I worked the radio at night for a short time. And then worked all through that summer before I went to college, and then actually dropped out of college and went back to work there, and then re-entered the criminal justice program in the following year.
Well, describe to me the following one word: criminal justice.
Boy, well, you know, some people say it's justice for the criminals and nobody else, but criminal justice is all about the government fulfilling its responsibility to ensure justice. Our founders talked about this. It's one of the fundamental roles, one of the fundamental reasons we have a government. We have national security, we have infrastructure, and we have criminal justice. So it's something I've been engaged in since I was 17 years old, and I haven't stopped yet. It's been 34 years now.
Yeah. One word to describe politics.
Brutal.
Yes. One word to describe Dorchester County.
Particularly brutal.
One word to describe Ray Nash.
Oh gosh, I don't know if Ray Nash can be described in one word.
Okay.
I can't describe myself. Quintin, that's an unfair question. You have to ask somebody else that question. I don't know how to describe it. Strange, I would think.
Okay.
Eccentric.
No, you seem like you're fun and outgoing to me.
Well, thanks.
Yeah. Well, we know that you actually love passions such as criminal justice and politics. But what is something else that people don't know about you?
A lot of people don't know that in my younger years, I was really fascinated with snakes and reptiles. And so back then it was weird. Today I could have my own television show on Animal Planet.
That's right.
But I've never lost my love for nature. I never lost my love for strange animals. And I watch those TV shows all the time. And when I have a chance, I'll get out in the woods myself as well. I went to India not long ago. Last year, as a matter of fact, on a snake hunting trip. And that was kind of fascinating. We found a couple of snakes, but I found the shed skin of a 14-foot king cobra there, and that was didn't find the snake himself. I found the skin.
Right.
That was kind of interesting.
Yeah, and I read too that you were once an elder or still an elder at one of your churches.
I was a founding elder actually of two different churches. One in Jacksonville, which was Cornerstone Community Church, and then a founding elder of Oakbrook Community Church in Somerville. I served on the board of elders there for over 20 years. We're not a member of that church now. Now we go to East Cooper Baptist Church in Mount Pleasant.
Yeah, I love that church over there.
We love it.
Yeah, Long Point Road.
Yep, exactly. Yeah. We found a Reformed Baptist church and we fell in love with it.
That's awesome. Well, switching gears to family, you have been married to your wife, okay, for 30 years now.
This is our 30th year, that's right.
Wow. Tell me, how did you two fall in love?
Well, she was working at the dry cleaners in Irmo, and I would bring my uniforms there to get dry cleaned. And we always laugh because we were so nervous around each other. I'd drop my change on the counter, or I'd walk out without picking up my. She'd bring my cleaning out, and I'd walk out without it. It was just funny. But that's how we met, the small town environment, and fell in love and got married, and raised our 3 kids right here in the Low Country. And they're pretty much grown now, and as soon as the dog dies, we're done.
Oh gosh! Now you can really retire. Well, you have been a police officer, you have been a sheriff, you have been a political candidate, and you have served our country. But let's talk about your future. When you look into your crystal ball, what do you see in your future?
Well, that's a hard, I've never been able to actually predict my future. My heart is in law enforcement, my heart is in serving. I can see myself going overseas again. I don't want to go back to Afghanistan. I did have 3.5 years there, which was enough. Yeah. But I can see doing another overseas assignment. I'd really like to stay home, though. I'd really like to stay home here in the Low Country. Right now, I'm really going to push forward with this International Academy of Public Safety and see if we can grow that into something that might be viable. But quite frankly, Quintin, I'm open to whatever God has in store. I try not to close my heart. I try never to say never.
Yes.
And just see what He has in store. It's always been a great adventure,
It really is. I was just about to say that. Well, Sheriff Ray Nash, it was so great talking to you.
It's my pleasure, Quintin. Thanks so much for what you're doing.
Anytime.